for this very kind reception. I'm very glad to be here in Athens again. My only embarrassment is that when I hear such kind words about me, flattering me too much, I find it difficult to recognize myself in them. I'm tempted to look back like, who is that guy, serious philosopher you were talking about? Now, as you, Thomas, know very well, in psychoanalysis, we call this gap between your, or in this case mine, stupid immediate existence and the symbolic identity, which is always the center with which you cannot immediately identify. We call this symbolic castration. So, thanks very much for a castrating experience. That's what one gets from friends. Since, as usual, I talk too much and have many things to say, let me begin. It is easy, it is fashionable to make fun of Francis Fukuyama's notion developed in the early 90s of the end of history. But are we aware that the majority of us, including most of today's left, we are, I don't know what would be the predicate, Fukuyamists. That is to say, most of us do accept liberal democratic capitalism as the finally found formula of the best possible society. Even a large majority of today's left, what it is proposing is just to make it a little bit better. More social care for the underprivileged, more tolerance, and so on, but almost nobody today questions the very fundamentals. Is political democracy the ultimate form? Do we need a state? Will capitalism survive? All the questions which were raised somewhere till 1970s and then disappeared. This for me is almost the only true question today. Do we accept this naturalization of capitalism? Or does today's global capitalism still contain some strong enough antagonisms which will prevent its indefinite reproduction? The reason I remain some kind of a Marxist is not that I believe that a new working class will emerge led by the Leninist party. No, I'm only more of a pessimist. I see in today's global constellation four antagonisms, four at least problematic regions where I think that the tension, the problem cannot be solved ultimately in the long term within the liberal democratic capitalist frame. Which are these antagonisms? First, of course, it is what I will talk about today, ecology. Now, I'm well aware, first, that if anything, the state socialist ways of dealing with ecological problematic were even much more catastrophic. I'm also well aware of the infinite adaptability of capitalism. Imagine a new global ecological catastrophe. It's clear that capitalism will use it just to open a new, incredibly dynamic field of investments. Let's even accept the hypothesis of global warming in the sense that the areas around equator will become uninhabitable and we will have slowly to move up. I can cynically, ironically imagine new real estate agencies offering nice locations to build your villa in southern Antarctic or whatever, Arctic. I don't have any illusions here. What I nonetheless think is that the nature of the risks involved in ecology fundamentally preclude a market solution. Why? Capitalism is very efficient, but it works in precise social conditions. It implies, its implication is that we trust into the market's mechanism, the market's invisible hand, which guarantees that the competition of individual egotisms works for the common good. However, I claim that this mechanism works only when our individual acts are part of what, in old Hegelian language, we can call social substance. You know, like whatever you do, it can trigger a counter-reaction, even a catastrophe, but somehow life goes on. It's counteracted by other forces and so on, so that we are just elements in a larger objective social process. I think we are reaching the limits of this logic. Today, maybe for the first time in human history, the act of a single social or political agent can alter or even interrupt the entire global historical process, an atomic catastrophe or whatever. It can change things so much so that we cannot any longer play this game of trusting what Hegel called List der Vernunft, the coming of reason. You do something wrong, but history corrects it, and so on. It can simply be that we do something wrong and simply everything goes wrong. I think this poses a limit to long-term capitalist solutions, because, you know, market works through error and trial. You try something, another person tries something, and then through repetitive attempts, a solution emerges. But we can well imagine ecological catastrophes or the threat of catastrophes where we simply cannot afford this kind of a slow process of trial and error. In other words, the paradox is that we are omnipotent today, omnipotent in the sense that an act of ours can maybe destroy the entire balance of our environment. But we don't know how we are omnipotent. We cannot predict the consequences of our acts. Again, in such a constellation, I don't think capitalism can do the job. The second feature that I see as a tension in today's capitalism is the obvious inappropriateness of private property for the so-called intellectual property. You know how the main problem of today's new digital industries is how to maintain the form of private property within which only the logic of profit can be maintained. Do the legal complications of biogenetics also not point in the same direction? This is why the key element of the new international trade agreements is the protection of intellectual property. So I think what happens here, if you follow it closely, is that if you let the logic of private property dominate the field, then we find ourselves in a situation where potentially some big company will literally own what in old English, and the term was now rehabilitated by Hart and Negri in their empire, what they call commons, the shared legacy. And it's very risky to allow the privatization of that. We will be, if you let market free, we will find ourselves in a situation where biogenetic companies will own our genes, where, for example, Microsoft, without the intervention of the American state, would literally own a private company, our very means of communication, and so on and so on. The third complication I see in